Jacob, welcome to the Petey Performance Podcast. I have just got a look at your AstroTurf that you've just got put in, and I can tell you, I'm not sure if you would know who Peter O'Mahony is, because I know that you're more in basketball circles than rugby circles, but Peter O'Mahony would be absolutely disgusted with your AstroTurf because he's known to, he hates AstroTurf. He's obsessed with his lawn. He's obsessed with his lawn.
It's like gotta be real.
Yeah, he's one of those lads that goes out and cuts it with his scissors. But I'm sure it's going to be a lot handier and it's going to save you a lot of time cutting your lawn now that you've got the Astro in, which is going to give you more time to give to developing metric and improving metrics. So how are you doing today? And how is business going? How is everything going?
I'm about to be unleashed now that I've got AstroTurf. No more mowing, no more like hosing off the dog's wee. Just like I've been like second gear. It's about to explode.
Nice.
Yeah, we've got a reasonably big dog and a reasonably small yard, and he does big wees, and they just killed the turf. So I really liked it. We tried to seed and tried to plant proper grass, and it just didn't stick. So I do appreciate a good lawn, and I love a proper grown lawn, but I was like, you know, Australia can get pretty dry here, so water usage, you want to try and limit that. And it's like fake grass is actually probably in the long run going to be better for the environment in terms of saving water and fertilizer and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty good. I'm really happy to have that turf in. It's you know, I'm not much of a house proud kind of person, but it's nice, so it's good. So a couple of really good days of weather. We had a great landscaper who came in to do the job, so things are well. And it's bloody cold in the morning here in Australia in the middle of winter, but we're having nice, clear, sunny days, so the afternoons aren't too bad. So
nice.
Can't complain.
Can't complain. That's super. So for those of the listeners that will be aware, your name on social media is the VBT Coach, and a lot of the things that you post are in relation to velocity-based training, which has been a hot topic for us on this podcast and for many others over the last couple of years. But an interesting point to note is that although you're the VBT Coach, you don't actually like the term velocity-based training, which is quite strange. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about why you think that there could possibly be a better term used? And I thought it'd be interesting to ask you, what would be your term that you would like to use in the future if you were given the opportunity and the license to do so?
Yeah, so sometimes when you're in the marketing and the social media space, you've just got to play to terms that are already familiar. And so if I tried to make a new term, and it's like, I'm the ABC coach. It's like, well, what's ABC? I have to explain it every single time. And so, you know, if you see VBT and you see coach, like, oh, he's a strength coach and he likes velocity-based training. Cool. I think the problem I have with velocity-based training as a term in VBT is what it is. It's kind of, it suggests that it's a whole new way and paradigm of training. And to be a VBT guy or a VBT coach or girl, then you have to be all in. And you can only then use velocity, and everything has to be based on velocity. And it's like, well, no, like velocity is a great accompaniment or a side dish to your percentage-based training or your RPE training or your linear program, or it's just a thing that gets your athletes excited for testing day because you use it in your testing. So the idea that your training has to be based on velocity, and it kind of suggests some absolute, like, you know, completely based on velocity. It's like, it's not the case. And you can use velocity technology, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, throughout the whole episode. You can use that to do hypertrophy training. So you could track tempos or range of motion or power or eccentric load or force. You can even calculate from velocity numbers. So there's so many ways to use the technology that isn't just about velocity and isn't just about basing your training on that velocity. You know, it works in so many different ways. So I'm more and more leaning towards the idea of calling it velocity tracking, just VT. Velocity tracking is kind of the term I use. So, you know, using a velocity tracking technology, having training that incorporates velocity tracking technologies and ideas and concepts is more, because then you're just tracking it, and what you do with that and what you're focused on can vary. And you can adjust that and change it based on season, athletes, rehab, performance, etc.
I like that. I like that because I was trying to think of what I would call it yesterday when I was walking around the park, and I was thinking something alongside technology, and technology but I didn't come up with the tracking word. So VTT is a good term. You'll have to change the Instagram handle maybe in the future. We'll see if it catches on. But I do agree with you. I think when you hear VBT, especially when you say it to athletes, they typically tend to think of things on the far end of the velocity spectrum. So they think high velocity, whereas you're just tracking
moving fast, moving with velocity.
Exactly, yeah. Which is understandable as well, like, because I think it's probably because for what, 10, 20 years, a lot of the strength focus has been on the other side of the velocity spectrum. So it's been quite slow. But obviously injury rates are still the same, if not rising. So it's probably best that we do address, if we take physics into account, we should be moving things that are heavy relatively slow, moving things that are light as fast as we possibly can, and then moving things in the middle that are relatively heavy as fast as we can, and and a little bit heavier but still a little bit lighter as fast as we can as well. Now that's a generalization, and I know we're going to get into force velocity spectrum later and zones, and you're not particularly a fan of that either. But people are going to think you're,
sound like a grumpy old
that's
man.
what I was just about to say. You're sounding like a hater here. So, how does Metrics differ then, or Metric, the app that you've developed? And one thing that you pointed out there that I do really, really like about Metric is the fact that it assesses range of motion. Because I saw yourself and Charlie from Strength Culture doing your little demos, and I thought it was great. I thought it was super. And obviously you're you're a little bit taller than him. So your range of motion on a lot of them was, say, a lot larger. But as well as that, he trained powerlifting for quite a while as well, which means he's trying to be efficient and trying to move the weight over as small a range of motion as he possibly can. So he's potentially became so efficient that he shortened his range of motion slightly, if that makes sense. And sorry for throwing Charlie under the bus if he is going to listen to this after.
Yeah, I think the word in there used, it's really valuable on the range of motion piece and on the VBT piece in terms of that idea of relative. So if you look at that range of motion idea, like your range of motion is relative to your limb lengths. So I'm 6'2", 6'3", played a lot of basketball. Most of my training I've done for explosive, like so that power type, dynamic effort type training, like aiming to increase a vertical leap, acceleration, change of direction, that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're a power lifter, your goal is to meet the competition rules of powerlifting, squat depth below parallel, lock out the deadlift, touch the chest on the bench, all those kind of rules that determine a lift's success or non-success. But then once you've achieved that, well, how can I do that a little easier or a little more efficiently or with less effort or in a way that allows me to stay tight through the sticking point, for example? So, the classic example is going from conventional deadlift to sumo deadlift. You're just becoming a, shorter range of motion until you reach quote unquote lockout. And so as long as the competition allows that, then the wider your sumo is without compromising your strength, obviously, then the less you'll have to lift the bar and the better you'll do. And this is also why powerlifting in particular is such a short man or short person game. Short people have shorter femurs, they have less distance to travel with the barbell, so they can usually load that up better than a taller person. And I don't think I'm tall by any stretch, being 6'2"-ish. But if you're at basketball and you're 200, 205, 210 centimeters, that's a lot of femur. That's a long way to go to get below parallel in a powerlifting setting. So in that situation, you might play with range of motion and use that as your metric to determine success. So maybe you want them getting closer to depth, or a depth that's good for them. It's like, all right, so for you, a good squat is 70 centimeters, and that's just above parallel, just below, depending on your coaching philosophy and things like that. And then you can use that to control, okay, we want to go deeper. So we want to go 70, we want to get up to 72, 75 centimeters. And you can then look at consistency on that as well as a technical skill. But I think range of motion is hugely powerful for powerlifters because they can, work on keeping it consistent within their sets and work on shortening it. So, you start as a rookie, you're doing conventional deadlifts, 60 centimeters, 65 centimeters. Can you get tighter, get your shoulder position better so you can make that 58 centimeters, 55 centimeters, and slowly creep the range down so you can increase the load and keep making yourself a more efficient lifter of barbells.
And like that is the argument you would hear from powerlifters in relation to VBT would be, oh, I don't need to do that because I'm just focused on moving the bar. Whereas adding that value in relation to range of motion, as well as other value like that, there is value in moving things fast, as we just touched on there. Like they can probably see how that would apply into their own training a little bit easier than when they hear VBT, as we just alluded to, they think moving light loads really, really fast, high velocity, which it isn't always the case. But to bring it back then, when did this fascination with velocity-based training start for you, and what kind of piqued your interest? And then how has that evolved over time? Like, were there many kind of thoughts that you had at the start in relation to VBT that you've now kind of have evolved rather than have thrown out, I suppose? Or are there any things that you've completely thrown out that you think, wow, I was really wrong there?
Constantly evolving my opinions and ideas in that space. It started pretty early. So I've been a strength and conditioning coach working full-time, private sector mostly, here at a gym called Core Advantage in Melbourne. And we had a GymAware unit, one of the stringed tethered devices, really early on. And so from 2013, 2012, I was playing with one of those connected up to the iPad. And it just made a lot of sense. It was like sports science, lifting, strength and conditioning, it's so much about numbers. How much weight's on the bar? How much weight did you do last week? Smooth, gradual progressions, running volumes, high speed efforts, sets, reps, all this stuff. We're measuring so many things, and we're tracking them and progressing them and controlling them. We're using these numbers to control our stress in order to adapt and make progress and optimize training. Everything's about optimizing. I was like, well, we don't really know what's happening within each rep. So each rep happens, but you could, you phone it in, you could just like, whatever, to do a sloppy set of 10, or you could do a really crisp, explosive set of 5. And you can't see that on the paper. And so what velocity-based training and velocity tracking technology enables is you can look within each rep and you can go, okay, well, how much range of motion was it? Just like we discussed, how much intent was applied, and we can infer intent through things like velocity numbers and power numbers. What was the peak velocity? What was the mean velocity? What was the eccentric time and attention? How long did you take on your eccentric? Did you pause? We're programming tempos. Did you pause the appropriate amount on your pause squats, or did you actually, quote unquote pause, as some athletes? So it was like, I was pausing at the bottom. No, the numbers don't lie. It's a more objective measure of these things. So I think in recent times, we'll keep coming back to the powerlifting example, I'm sure. Powerlifting is really gravitating towards this RPE idea, rating of perceived exertion and reps in reserve. I think velocity-based training is just another dimension of that same idea. It's like we're trying to measure the exertion, the quality, the intent of these sets and of these repetitions, and velocity just does that objectively. It's like if you measure it in your device or your technology, something like Metric or GymAware, if this thing is accurate enough, which they are, all of them are so good these days. If it's accurate and you're doing it consistently, you can pick up a really good picture of where you're at for performance, for readiness, for quality of training, targeting different zones, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. You target that sort of light load, fast stuff, that medium type power stuff, or you can look at your strength stuff and track progress beyond just weight on the bar. So if you're doing your squats and you work up to 140 kilos, well, last week I did 140 as well, but this week it moved faster. That's a sign of progress. I'm producing more force. I'm accelerating the bar easier. So therefore I've gotten stronger, or I've worked harder. I'm fired up today. I'm, more aroused, whatever the case might be. So the idea of objectively measuring our training and really quantifying what's going on down to the millisecond, down to the 60 frames or 100 frames per second, it just makes so much sense. Like, well, the only reason I think, in my opinion, the only reason it's not done more is because the technology is not that good in terms of app interfaces, ease of use, convenience, price point. Those kind of things have limited that. And then knowledge. I think people don't know how to apply that information. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of our mission with Metric and with VBT Coach is to sort of bridge that gap, make it more accessible.
I love how you said the objective measurement there, because obviously with the RPE and the reps in reserve model, it's subjective. So there's a big scope for you to make kind of mistakes yourself in how you apply it, because we both know there's a lot of things impacted on your mental and emotional well-being going into the gym. So if you have a stressful day and your head is all over the place, go on.
Or if your weights are at stake, if you're doing your second last warm-up set And depending on what the RPE of that set is will determine what you go up to. And you like hard work, you're an athlete who enjoys the gym and likes lifting heavy weights. And if you report an RPE 9 instead of an RPE 8, they take 5 kilos off the bar. Well, there's no way I'm saying it's RPE 9. It was totally an RPE 8. I could definitely do 2 more reps. And so even the best, strictest lifters can't actually, do this, with super objective precision, because there is just a subjective factor. And the tricky thing with RPE is we'll never know whether you're right or not because you rack the bar. So if you do your set of bench and you do 5 reps and you call an RPE 7 as you get out of the set, we'll never know because you can't unrack it and go do those last 3 and go, yep, see, prove it, there's my 7. It's always going to change. And so there was an interesting study. I haven't dived into it much, but I remember seeing kind of the headline of it, which was they did RPE training, but the athletes had to call out their RPE as they were lifting.
Oh, wow.
So had to go take their sets and they do 5, and then they call out their RPEs. Like they go 8, and then they do 2 more, and then actually see if it was in fact an 8. And it was really interesting. I haven't dived into the results, but I think that's a really clever idea. In set, calling out your RPEs, whether it's in your head or actually outward, and then going, all right, you just called RPE 7. Show me the last 3 reps. Can you make an RPE 10? And were you in fact correct? I think doing that from time to time is a really good idea of calibrating your RPEs. Or, a better idea, switch to velocity and get an objective measure and start using velocity numbers to determine strain and effort.
100%. That's an interesting one, calling out the RPE during the set. Once you're going up towards the top level RPE, it's going to be more difficult, I would say. But
yeah, you might not want to do it as you're holding 250 kilos on your swimmer dead. 7.
yeah, exactly. But what springs to mind for me is when you're using the velocity-based tracking, or you have some sort of tracking on the barbell, we both know that sometimes you'll do a set and you'll be like, come out of it and you'd be like, wow, that felt like shit, that moved really slow, and then you check it and it moved really fast. And equally, sometimes you're like, yeah, that was really good, that was really fast. You check it and you're just floored. You're like, oh my god, that was pathetic. How did I think that was good? So having that external feedback is just so beneficial, because a lot of the time, if somebody tells you, like I do see when I am assessing, say, readiness, and I might use RSI in the gym with the lads or the ladies, like if I look at their RSI and it's down at the bottom end and you tell them that it's not great, this was a mistake that I made earlier, then they will perceive I'm not feeling great today, so I'm going to go light. Whereas if you didn't tell them, they probably wouldn't know. And equally, if they could come in and they could do really, really well in it, and I'd say, wow, your readiness is really good, you're flying today. And then they just turn to me and say, I feel like shit. So there's so many other factors playing into how we feel, that obviously our body can kind of, our body can be in a good state of readiness, but our mind mightn't be there. And that is the value of having that external feedback of their objective measurement, in that we don't need to ask ourselves how we're feeling. We can have the machines tell us what we're feeling and how we're doing, and how hard to push it, I suppose.
The Schrodinger's cat of readiness. You both are ready and not ready until you're told otherwise.
Yeah, 100%.
It's such a lab coat effect type thing, where it's like you're just waiting for the numbers. I do the same. I wear an Aura ring, which is a great sleep and readiness tracker and things like that. And it's interesting. You look at it and goes, oh, you're low readiness. Take it easy today, Jacob. And I'm like, am I though? Like, what did I didn't really do anything yesterday. Why am I? Because I had 1 glass of wine with dinner, so I'm a little bit, my heart rate was a little bit elevated while I slept. It's very jumpy. So I think VBT can be the same. So I've been speaking with different powerlifters and stuff online. They're playing with the idea of using velocity data to determine their meet load selections for their attempts in a powerlifting competition, which is a really interesting idea. And I think there's a lot to it. Taking into account fatigue on the day, and did your peaking or your tapering process go right? But I also think like powerlifting is a very mental sport. Like you got to get out there, you got to psych yourself up, you got to get in the zone and do it. If you're on the day of your competition using VBT numbers, I'm not sure if that's actually a smart idea. Yeah. I actually think, in the acute, session to session, I don't think using that stuff to determine, am I going to start with 180 or 185? I don't think that's actually good. I think that will mess with your head as much as it'll help.
I agree.
Whereas if we zoom out a bit, I think velocity-based training data, sleep tracking data, RSI type numbers, I think they're really good for trending, looking for trends over multiple weeks strung together. So, if you're doing your RSI with the team every Monday and Thursday, before their weights day, if an athlete's down from their moving average, for example, 3 weeks in a row, then you have the conversation, go, hey, things are dipping a bit. What's going on? Are you okay? Or, you wait that 4th session and then they bounce back and it wasn't really an issue. So I think sometimes there's a balancing act between being too reactive and going, oh, low readiness, everyone go have a nap, get out of the gym, go home and have a sleep and eat a sandwich, versus ignoring it and just going, we have to train hard no matter what. There's that balancing act between the two. I'm not sure what the answer is. And I think it would change based on context, environment, athlete buy-in, coach experience, all those kind of things.
I've had this conversation before. I think it was with Jake Tura, and it's a paradox in a way that you have to be somewhat proactive and somewhat reactive in your programming. And I think that the value of the VBT is that it both informs your training for the majority, but also brings greater intent to your training. And if we pull back your analogy there, your anecdote, and apply it to team sports, I'm not going to go in and assess readiness for a team sport athlete prior to a game. I've just spent the last 3 to 4 days telling them that they're great and they're ready to go and they're fantastic, to convince them that they are, so that their confidence is high going in. Whereas you don't want to add in another measurement to kind of discount your own confidence in yourself. The only application in a team sport setting that I may be assessing readiness would be a late fitness test for an athlete that we're unsure of if they're going to be able to play the game. And equally, there's probably there's better measurements that I would use than strictly readiness and their RSI, etc. Like more applicable to the game, say. So break down the game into its component parts, see if they can tolerate that. And then generally it's going to come back to asking them, because if they feel like they're going to be able to get through it, they're probably going to be able to get through it. If they don't feel like they're going to get through it, they're not. So that's the part of coaching. Like, we might be talking about the harder skills here, but there's a softer side to coaching that is important as well. But you did touch on earlier some of the barriers to using VBT, and I would see them myself in that the major one for me, obviously we use Output, who are the sponsors of the podcast, so we'll give them a plug there. But it's not the ease of use for me, it's the ease of use for the athletes, and not all of them. So Output is great and it's really handy in that for the majority of the athletes, I can give them the unit and I can give them the little iPad and they can work it completely fine. But there's probably 5% of the athletes that are like, what the hell does this mean? What am I doing here? Somebody help me with this. And that is probably the barrier to use within the whole squad, and why I have to, although I can pass it to them, I have to be kind of observing what they're doing to make sure that they're using it in the correct manner. And then obviously, as you touched on there are a number of other barriers as well. So if we are to break down those barriers and move forward in the use of VBT and get more people using it, what do you think has to change? Is it predominantly education? Because I know that that's something that you are striving and working towards on your social media channels. And I'm lucky enough that I've seen the full growth, because I saw the page where it had I think 3 posts, and now it's just like, how many? You must have over 100
Oh,
now.
really early.
Yeah,
120 posts, something like that. And I've grown to nearly 6,000 followers, which is great. It's awesome to see that people, because I'm going to be honest, my stuff's not sexy. I'm proud of my graphics. I think they look good, but let's be honest, reporting the results of a study with a couple of bar graphs is not a sexy thing in the world of Instagram, when there's, all kinds of reels and whatever else going on these days. So to actually be able to grow a channel, and sticking true to what I believe in, which is, sports science and good practical advice and recommendations, is pretty cool. But I think education's part of it. I think with historically with VBT, if we go historically with VBT, it's been expensive. Devices have been in the multiple thousands of dollars to get. They're hard to get. A team would only buy a couple potentially. Then you've got to pay for a software subscription on top of that. If you go to the budgeting department, you go, hey, I need this money for this thing for the gym. it kind of creates a mindset where it has to be the answer. And so I think that comes to the name as well. Like, it has to do everything. If we're going to spend thousands of dollars on this unit, it better, cook our toast and microwave our lunches and, clean the boots and do everything for us. It must be an incredible thing. And VBT can do that. You can go all in and do the whole thing based on velocity and power numbers and range of motion and all that sort of stuff. But I think it also works really nicely as just a little compliment, as a side dish, as I said earlier on. So if you don't have to spend as much money on something, then the stress levels and the urgency to get 100% utility out of it goes down. So if you buy an incredibly fancy thing, then you should go, well, I need to use this fancy thing for everything. Nice new set of boots. I better wear those boots to every event. But if you just buy some old Chucks or whatever, if I wear them, I wear them. If I don't, they sit in the cupboard. Doesn't matter. The stress to use something is low. So if things are cheaper, I think the urgency to use it for everything in the gym goes down. And then you can go, oh, well, we're just going to dabble with this, and we'll find little ways to incorporate it to increase intent, give athletes feedback, monitor readiness on a couple of tests. So it takes a lot of the pressure off using VBT, I think, which I think is a good thing. So that means you can go, well, we're just going to use this once a month. We're going to get it once a month and have a VBT day, and everyone's going to compete on a lift, who can get the most power on the Olympic lifts. And it creates a bit of fun. It's exciting. It's engaging. Your athletes buy into it. Then they get a bit curious. Can we do that more often? How can I use that in more of my lifts? And so that lowers the barrier, lowers the stress on it, and makes it a much easier to use thing. And so I think that's a big part of it. And I think while I like educating around the VBT stuff, I think there should be less of a need to educate around the VBT stuff. So we talk internally about the idea of taking the VBT out of VBT. So less about these fancy, sophisticated protocols, and have the app, in Metric's case, have the app do the analysis for you. And it provides not AI coaching per se, but it says, look, this athlete compared to their own recent context is a bit down. Do with that what you will. Instead of going, here are the raw numbers, you have to go export their CSV, import to your dashboard, log in, do this, do that, run the spreadsheet, then find out that they've got low readiness. Too late. They've left the gym. They've gone. They're home. You need to get that stuff in the app at time. So one thing we're doing at Metric is we're trying to build an opinionated app, an app that has an opinion on this stuff and actually delivers insights when you need it in a meaningful way. I think that's a big change that not just us, but I think Output are doing a great job as well. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what Whoop do now that they've bought Push. And there's others. Like, it's something that we're moving forward as an industry and as a group, I think.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Like, Output was such a great investment because it covers so much. You can test so much with it, and it's so simple to use. And as well as that, it's quite easy to move between athlete to athlete. So it's pretty efficient. As long as they know how to do so. You just click on the dashboard, you're straight in, and then you can assess the same exercise or a different exercise. And that is the value of it, that it covers so much. But I do worry
of their range of things they can do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so extensive on what they do. It's very impressive.
Yeah, but that's the thing as well with Metric, like, because in the past, if you had an accelerometer, that's all that it was measuring. Whereas now, as we touched on there, Metric is assessing far more than that. And that is the way that the industry seems to be moving. But equally, by what you just said, like in relation to Whoop, and the other thing is that you would worry that at some stage, when, not that you're all competing, you're all driving each other on to do new things, but is there going to come a point where people and companies are going to say, maybe we're doing too much here, maybe we need to just focus in on what we're doing and get that really, really good, rather than trying to broaden the scope all the time? Do you know what I mean? Because it's similar to what you just touched on in relation to your social media, in that you haven't been putting out incredibly sexy content, to use your own words, but you found your niche. You found your niche, and that's why the growth is there, because people know what they're getting. It's like Ron Seal, it does what it says on the tin. Like, you go straight in and it's VBT Coach, and everything here is going to be informative around velocity-based training, and that's something that people want to learn more about. So that's why they're getting interested in it. So that's why they follow you, I guess. And that's the similar thing with
Yeah.
investing in a velocity-based training unit or some kind of tracking technology, is that you've bought it for that. If it gives add-ons, then that's going to be of benefit as well. But it's got to do what it is made to do really, really well. And is that something that you've been
Yeah.
working on improving? And what improvements have you been making with Metric over the last, say, 12 months even?
Yeah. So we only launched, we did the maths. We only launched 4 months ago. So we've only been public since April or May. So we've only been available publicly not very long. And so we are, I suppose we're the opposite of output in a way. We're very focused. And so if they're offering tests everywhere and offering a diverse range of things with a big focus on sort of teams, complete testing solution, if you will, we're more somewhat based on how we've approached technology, being computer vision versus accelerometer. Means we've come at getting the same results from a different perspective. And so we're very much focused on the barbell lifts at the moment because of that's how we've built our technology. So we've built a very precise way of tracking barbells effectively. And so if you're training a lot with barbells and you do a lot of trap bar work, cleans, Olympic lifts, stuff like that, then we're going to be fantastic. But if you do a lot of sprints and jumping and RSI stuff, then you'll either need metric plus force plates or plus something else, or maybe something like output might be a better solution to get the speed and elastic.
That's me with my big speed bias. That's me. That's why it suits me so well.
Yeah, and so in the future, I think things like integrating into AMS solutions will be part of that, so that you can get your data from metric into your AMS solution type thing, and then you can combine that with your programming solution and with your timing gates and with your force plate data and put it all in one place. Will be part of what we'll need to build out. But at the moment, we're really focused on just getting the algorithm really precise and accurate. So we've just, data collection has just been completed on our first external validation with Deakin University here in Melbourne. So fingers crossed we get good results there. Time will tell. And we've done one internal validation. We've got another one lined up. We're going to start getting data for in the next week or two. But the big thing we're working on at the moment is Olympic lift tracking and precision on that. And then we want to add a bar path feature. We think bar path is a really big important part of what we're offering. And so as of August 10th, 2022, for those listening months in advance, hello from the past, we'll be adding bar path features, Olympic lift features, and just improving its ability in sort of different lighting settings. Because with computer vision, kind of like your own eye, you need good contrast to be able to see things and track things. So we're working on improving that. And then I suppose moving on from that, that'll be kind of our 1.0 version of the app, and then it's adding more extensive data analysis features. So providing that context, insights into the information, helping coach and athletes interpret what's going on with their dashboard.
It's all feedback, and it's more different forms of feedback, and that's the value of using it. And at the end of the day, like, you want to give that feedback to each rep, each portion of each rep. Even you're breaking it down even further. But in relation to feedback, then, is your brother sick of you coming back with more feedback on the app, or does he welcome it? Because like, you're on the far end, you're in the practical setting, whereas he's in the development setting. So it sounds like you work really, really well together. But like, does he talk about some things that you haven't a clue what he's talking about? And do sometimes you go off on tangents and he's like, what the hell are you talking about here? What do you want me to do?
Absolutely. There's so much of that. So my brother is low-key a genius. He's a proper genius level thinker. His ability to come up with the solution he did for tracking barbells is just next level. Like how he's approached it. We've got a patent pending on it, which is really cool. And that's all his work. So he's done a fantastic job there writing the code. But yeah, when I come to him with a little sports science thing, or like, do you reckon we could do some exponential weighted averages or some this and some that? And he's like, well, like, yeah, we can do it, but do I have to do it? So it's tricky because you wanted to, and the tricky thing from my end, not writing much of the code or none of the code, let's be honest. When you write none of the code, you think a feature is just a little feature. I would just add this thing and you put, a new line of numbers with some up and down arrows based on change, things like that. And like on the screen, it's just a row of numbers, but to calculate and find and then present those numbers in real time is a whole thing. And it's like, you got to arrange it and organize it. And I do a bit of the design work for the app. So making the aesthetic of the app with Tommy, one of our other co-founders. And then we got to kind of go to Davey and we go, look, this is what we're working on. Is this crazy? Are we like, is this going to be months of work, weeks of work, days of work? And then it's about sort of managing what we think the final form is going to be. Like in my head, I've got a very strong vision of what, an almost complete version of Metric looks like, both a coach's version and an individual version. I've got a really good idea of what that looks like, but we are miles from that. We've got so much work to do. And so it's like, how do we break that down into 1,000 little bites, break the elephant down into 1,000 little bites so we can take it one bite at a time and add one feature and then add another feature, but add them in a way that both works in the early stages like now, but also doesn't ruin your ability to build that complete version. So you're balancing the future vision that's grand and impressive with all these settings and customization and colors and different app icons and all that kind of stuff, and paid features as well, with can we integrate that into what is effectively just a simple basic app at the moment. So it's a very tricky balancing act. And then you've got to do that as well with the fact that we've only got one developer. Davey's our sole guy writing code at the moment. So small team with big ambitions and a complex algorithm to maintain and keep fixing bugs on, as well as delivering the front end features, the feedback stuff that you talk about, and providing context and data insights for users in the app in real time. So it's challenging. It's been fun. It's interesting, but it's a good thing I'm doing it with my brother, so we can share good, honest, open feedback. And like, he can go, Jacob, I can do that. It's going to take me a month. Is it really a month's worth of work? I'm like, you're right. We probably don't need that. I'll find something simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you throw into the mix that you're going to have both an Android and an iPhone app, which is a whole other ball game. Like, it's so, and you'll always get those questions because people are so tied to whatever they use, like whether it's Android or Apple. And that's output on Android, which is funny because you guys are on Apple, isn't it?
Yeah, so maybe we should just partner up with Output, and they can handle the Android market. We'll handle the iOS market, and between us, we will dominate. Yeah. And we'll just rule the world with our two little solutions on the opposite sides.
I can link you up. Do you ever struggle? This is an interesting question now, and it's not really in particular to the VBT. It's probably more in relation to working with your brother in the business. Do you ever struggle to switch off from the business conversations now that you're working together as well? Like, do they occur at the dinner table and parents are like, guys, talk about something else, please?
Yeah, it is a challenge. I also work from home. This is my home office. I'm in our garage, which has been converted into a nice little home office. So it's good I can separate that from my house is back there with the dog and the kitchen and the living room. And I come out here and this is the work zone. So that's nice. But my brother and I, we're pretty close. We're really good mates outside of work, before work. This whole thing started because we would just lift together. He'd come to the gym after I'd finished a coaching shift and we'd just train. And it's like, we started training with VBT devices. And he's like, why do we have to use this string? What's going on? It's like, oh, it's just the best there is. And he's like, I can do better. And so he went and he did what we think is better. So yeah, there is a challenge. And I try and keep it based on channel. So if we use Slack as our communication channel here at work. And so if I'm on Slack, it's a work thing. Hey, Davey, have you got a new version of the app for me to test? Where are we at on that bug fix? Have you seen this bug fix from this user? We want to change the color of that button. All that kind of stuff happens on Slack on that channel. And anything that's personal, like I sent him a photo of my new turf this afternoon to show off the new turf, ask when he's going to come around for a beer. That I did via text message. So I'll do that via text message, via calls. And anytime it's after hours or on a weekend, I really try and keep the work to more the fun, interesting side of work, like the hypothetical questions that are fun to talk about. Like, what if we added machine learning, or what if we did this? And it's like the more vague, that's not actually going to be a job for Monday morning conversations, and keep that. Those conversations are fun to have, and they're interesting because that's what's fun about our job and building this thing. But anything that's like a bug fix or a button color or font alignment or anything stupid like that waits till Monday 9 a.m. So getting better at that. I tend to struggle more at that than him because I think I'm a bit more excitable. He's a pretty serious and focused kind of guy. So I tend to get a little excited and want to talk about all this stuff all the time, and it doesn't fatigue me, but I think it does a bit with him. So out of hours, we'll talk about ideas and concepts, but not actually about hours and work and jobs, which I'm getting better at. We're two years into working together, and I think I'm maybe halfway to where I need to be.
That's interesting, man. That's like an interesting framework. So it is, and I'll definitely be looking to apply that myself. But then in relation to frameworks, we talked about it earlier, slightly just brushed over it. We talked about using the force velocity curve and then zones-based training. And I actually had this conversation with Will Rattel. I think the issue with that and using those zones for training is probably people get so tied to it. And it's probably a symptom of strength and conditioning coaches that it's so black and white sometimes. This is good, this is bad, this is exactly what it has to be, this is not, this is outside the range. I think the value of that framework is the value in teaching and understanding force velocity profiling and understanding how to move loads. But the issues arise when people tie themselves to the specific numbers. And I think that's what irks you about it from listening to you speak about it in the past, because these things, like everything, are highly individual. Like you may have an athlete that moves very, very well at one end of the spectrum and in one particular movement. And like, we've been talking about power lifters, like they're obviously and weightlifters as well. They're obviously going to be very efficient in some movements and able to move it really, really fast because that's what they're trained at. And in other movements, they won't be able to move it as fast. So how can you apply one exercise to the other when exercises are not the same?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Did you say Will Rattel you were talking about? Yeah. So he was the one. So I thought I was on my own with my dislike for the zones. When I started VBT Coach, I was like, I've got this thing. I hate the zones. I think the numbers are ridiculous. Why are we applying that to all these different exercises? You know, range of motion is just the root cause of all of it. If you do a shorter range of motion, you just don't have as much time to accelerate, so you can't reach as absolute a velocity. And that's just it. If you have a shorter range of motion exercise, a shorter athlete, 0.75 means a completely different thing for a 6'5" person versus a 5'5" person. It's just, you can't do it. So you need to customize. But Will had a video on his YouTube channel, and I don't know, and we've never spoken, but I saw this video and I was like, I'm not alone. Someone else thinks this is a bit weird. Because it's just common knowledge. It's in the VBT world, all the companies like how to use the zones, and they use it as this absolute thing. My thing was like, if you use the zones and you apply your training, the idea that, if you're under 0.5 meters per second, then that's a maximum strength stimulus. If you're above 0.1, if you're above 1.0, then that's a starting strength stimulus. These kind of arbitrary names and arbitrary values. Like, if you believe that, and if you follow that system and use it as an all-encompassing system, which is kind of how it's advertised, then that means you can't believe that percentages have any relevance, or RPE has any relevance, or fatigue has any, like, that means that flies in the face of all the other really great foundational sports science principles that we all use. Above 80% is a strength stimulus, not if you use the speed zone. So the fact that it was so clashed so aggressively with everything else we know about sports science made it seem like you had to be a VBT guy. You had to be all in on VBT to use it. And I think that was the big problem I had with it, was just these arbitrary names, these arbitrary values. And then that would just be confusing. Well, okay, I need to lift below 0.5, but I've got power lifters. So their sumo deadlifts are like 0.1 meters per second, super slow stuff. So their strength zone is all of their sumo deadlifts. They can't do a speed sumo deadlift. But then you open that up and you go, well, who would want to do a speed sumo deadlift? It's not a speed exercise. Go do sprints, go do jumping. Like, exercise prescription is so much more than just the speed at which the thing moves. The quality, the elastic nature, repeated efforts versus a single effort, using bands, using chains, having a float phase with the jump or an Olympic lift. Like, there's just so much more than just constraining it to an X-Y axis. I think that was a big problem. That it wasn't initially supposed to be this way, but it's kind of been adopted as a holy grail. Dogma. Do this and all okay. A dogma, yeah, exactly.
Like, that is it. And we just touched on it. The intention was probably teaching and learning and understanding, but then people and probably guidelines, not even guidelines along which you could kind of use it. But people say
Brian,
they changed could to should.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the issue.
And made it absolute. Brian Mann first developed them with his football athletes, college football athletes. And he did years of practice and years of reps and years of velocity data. And he worked out that he wanted, on their dynamic effort day, he wanted them above 0.75 meters per second on their squats and their deadlifts. Powerlifting regulation squat, a conventional deadlift. If we do it that day on our dynamic effort day, if they chase 0.75 meters per second, good things happen. That's it. That was the prescription. We want them to do dynamic effort work above 0.75 for a homogenous, standardized group of American football players.
Football athletes, yeah.
Same age, similar build, similar, sporting, type 2 profile, things like that. And that's just been, and he specifically sorry, my phone's ringing. He specifically didn't apply it to the bench, and he wrote in his notes, this doesn't work for bench press because the numbers don't work with 0.75 meters per second. And yet people are just like, here's the numbers, do it on everything, you'll be fine. It's like, it was one population in one context. So I think I've been angry. That's enough angry man for one night.
We love it. We love angry man.
I'm only 31. I sound like I'm like 51 or 61. Like, these kids these days, I don't know what they're doing. But I think it annoys me because VBT has so much potential and there's so much great stuff going on here, and it gets shrouded in these absolutes, these shoulds instead of these coulds.
Yeah.
Like you put perfectly, like, oh, you should do this, and this is the way to use it. No, that's a way, and there are dozens of others, tiny through to all encompassing, that you could dabble in or transform your training if you like. Up to you.
And that's the thing with output as well that is so useful, is they change the velocity that you are aiming for based on the exercise selection that you're using the accelerometer for. And as well as that, it's also editable. So when you go in, you can edit it per athlete, and then it will remember what the athlete had it on the last day that they used it for that specific exercise, which is just so useful and saves so much time. And that is the argument that you get from athletes when they're like, not athletes, from coaches when they're saying, I'm not going to use it because it's impractical in terms of time. I can't give enough time to it. So what would be your advice in relation to the use of it? Is it to have a specific parameters or a specific exercise and a specific day in which you will use it, and not try to use it across everything? Because typically, and I've been guilty of it myself, when you invest in a new tool as an S&C coach, you're like, I'm going to use this for everything now, and then you use it for
all our lifts on force plates now, guys.
And you use it for everything for like a few months, and then it kind of peters out in a way, and you're using it less, or you're using it more sporadically then after that. So what would be your advice, and how would you deal with that issue in relation to coaches saying it's impractical? How do you get the buy-in from them to implement it into their training? And maybe it's just a case of, these are the benefits that I've seen from athletes, and this is the gap that it fills. And then when you show them that, you get more buy-in. But go on, you had a question for me?
Yeah. Do you mean velocity zones or velocity tracking in general? We zoom back out to velocity
zooming back out to tracking, because I don't want to get you any angrier.
Fair enough. I think my advice would be start with less. Try not to do everything all at once. Start with the smallest application on one exercise. So you've got an Olympic lift part element to your program, or your guys or girls clean at the start of their workout. Start tracking power output on those cleans. And don't do anything with it. Just start tracking it, showing the number to your athletes, and see what happens. They might really gravitate to the competition side of it. Or what's this watts per kilo number? Oh, that's how many watts, how much power you're producing per unit of body weight. And an elite athlete can do 15. Oh, I can do 13. Maybe you can get 15. And then creating a little bit of competition out of it. It's like, maybe create a leaderboard out of that. But I'd really let it evolve organically from something like that. And so I wouldn't try and thrust it onto athletes too aggressive. It's like, we want you guys to track your thing. So here's a device, use your camera, download this app, whatever the case might be. Just start tracking stuff, and just, maybe give the athletes a few guidelines, a few little, rails to work within, and then see what happens. And they might really gravitate to that, might really want more. So, all right, we're going to apply it to our squats as well now. Or we have a problem with our athletes not working hard enough. So we're actually going to chase more percentage fatigue in our workouts. So we're going to explain to the athletes, your sets don't count unless you achieve at least 20% velocity loss. And you have to give all your effort you can on every single rep. So you start encouraging them to work harder, or vice versa. You got a bunch of athletes that just keep grinding themselves into failure. So you go, all right, we're doing 3x3s, our top sets for this part of the training block, or whatever it might be. None of your reps are allowed below 0.4 meters per second. If you hit that 0.4 meters per second, your set finishes. So if the first rep is 0.4, you're done, single. You're only doing 1 instead of 3. Pick a lighter weight if you want to get your full triple. So you can modulate and control exertions. That's a really simple way to give your athletes guardrails and guidelines to work within that aren't just the load on the bar. And it takes their attention away from the weight on the bar. I think is a really easy starting place. Having them chase intent and the quality of their reps, not just what's on the top, how quickly can I get them a 4-plate lift or whatever the case might be. So,
or how quickly can I get out of here? which is typically the
Yeah.
problem. Just going through the motions.
On the flip side, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they're going to motion. So you could do the opposite. So you could go, okay, your reps don't count unless you can lift 100 kilos above X velocity. Or I need 10 good reps at 1,000 watts. I think power is an underrated number too. Having athletes chase power, even on strength exercises. So if you've got athletes, like you say, that don't like the weight room, I don't care how you do it. I need 10 reps of trap bar deadlift above 800 watts or 9 watts per kilo, whatever metric, find a number that works. Don't make it impossible. Make it something possible. Okay. We need 10 total reps above 800 watts. I recommend 4-4-2 for 3 sets. Cool. Done. They then have to work up to a decent enough weight to achieve that amount of power. They have to lift with intent, so it has to move fast. You think next week it's 820, or next week it's 12 reps at 800 watts. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be perfectly scientific, but if you've got a buy-in problem, you can use this to create a little more buy-in, or just set rules. They just have to reach your threshold before they go, and that stops them going through the motions as much.
100%. That's the value of the feedback immediately from the rep, and it's not just coming from you, so they'll get less sick of you telling them all the time, because it's typically the same athletes that are the ones that are typically ego lifting and going too heavy, and you're constantly telling them that's too heavy, lighten the load please. And the other ones on the other end that are going too light, and you're like, that's too light, you need to go heavier than that. You're not really stressing yourself or pushing any stimulus there, you're just going through the emotions. And when it comes from you, that's an issue as a coach, because the same voice over and over again just becomes white noise at the end of the day. It's like, oh, he hates me, he's always telling me to do this, etc. Hopefully they don't think that,
coach.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But that is the value of it, and that's something that I would see the value in using it, and I do see the value in using it there. And it comes up again and again. And you know what the valuable thing is that I've seen when I use it, that the athletes now observe the velocity at which they're moving it, the power, etc., the wattage, and then they make that informed decision themselves now. Like they'll just look at me and go, oh, it's too heavy, rather than me looking at it and telling them that it's too heavy, because
the numbers don't lie. Exactly.
So they can notice it. So that's obviously an improvement in their education around it. And as well as that, the benefits, and I've heard you speak about it, and we kind of touched about it there as well, is you can have athletes compete against each other in relation to various metrics, even though the athletes have such different prototypes in regards to their own size, weight, strength, etc. And I've seen that myself, and I've seen you can focus on specific things. So like obviously working with a GAA team, there is a large variance in the size of the players, probably more so than in AFL, I would say, because there's less of a demand to be really, really tall. So we've a couple of players that are very, very tall, and then we have a couple of players who are a lot shorter and a lot lighter. But we can look at their peak power on, say, a bench press and compare that against each other, even though one of the athletes has a way longer arm. So his peak power might be really, really high, but his average is really, really low in relation to the other athletes. So by focusing on the right metric, we can drive that competition. And typically when you're working with male athletes in particular, that competition drives on standards completely, because they're just so uber ultra competitive with each other. They want to be the best, they want to be the fastest, they want to be the strongest in the weight room. So that's the value in implementing it in the weight room as well, is we should be competing, but we shouldn't be solely looking at the weight on the bar, because if we do that, it's the same athletes all the time that are going to be at the top level, because they are better trained and they react better to that strength stimulus. And is it going to apply to the field? Probably to a certain degree, but probably not ultimately. Like we have all played with that athlete that is incredibly strong in a gym but plays like dog shit. Sorry to excuse the phrase.
It was me. I was that athlete, super strong, had no hops, no speed, nothing. I love the weights too much.
Yeah,
I had no spring, had no bounce. But yeah, like you hit the nail on the head. They're like they're the two things. Is it turns your subjective coaching of, oh, Johnny, Sally, lift faster. I need you to lift with more effort, to hit this number. See that number? Make that number go higher on your next set. Like that is so simple. And then, like you said, it then unlocks the second benefit, which is the motivation and the competition piece. For guys, leaderboard. top 5 watts per kilo, have them compete relative to body weight and have them get after that, peaks, mean, play around with that, find what works for you. And with female athletes, have them beat themselves. They love competing with themselves. So it's like, can you get your all-time best peak power output? Can you increase your estimated 1RM on a profiling score or whatever it might be? We generalize here male and female athletes. I've worked with a lot of both.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically
we are
the case.
generalizing.
Female athletes.
We are generalizing.
Yeah, very, very broad. There are typically female athletes tend to love competing with themselves and more intrinsically motivated. Whereas the guys like to show off and ego lift and all that kind of stuff. And so you take the attention away from ego lifting the weights to ego lifting the speed or power. I think that's really powerful. But there are exceptions. There'll be females like, chuck me on that leaderboard. I want to go with the guys. And you'll be surprised if you get a strong, explosive female athlete, they will push the guys when it comes to relative to body weight stuff, because they're usually a little bit smaller. So they can, move some decent weight there and give the guys a good run for their money. So yeah, find what works for your population, whether they need a kick up the bum and they need a bit more motivation and they like a bit of competition, a bit of sort of, rah-rah type stuff, but not, like you say, chasing the heavy weights, which has a diminishing returning benefit. Mm-hmm. Once you get them above 1.5, for most sports, above 1.5, maybe 2 times body weight, there's not much more to be gained there. Chasing 2.5 isn't going to be transformative, but chasing a faster 1.5 times body weight squat or chasing a new maximum power output on your trap bar jumps, that's going to have really great transfer to jumping, speed, change of direction, all that kind of stuff. And then on the opposite side, if you've got athletes that work too hard, use velocity-based training to rein them in. Mm-hmm. Set limits, set zones, set thresholds, cut sets early if you need to explain, I need you working, that's too heavy. We want you working more in a power zone or whatever the case might be.
Mm-hmm. That's it as well, though, is you can get the buy-in from the athletes that hate the weights when you use it, because there's a new stimulus, there's a new focus point, and it's more enjoyable.
It's novel, yeah,
exactly. So that you can get them to push themselves a little bit harder out of it, and typically those athletes aren't going to be the ones that are up towards the higher end of the team in terms of their strength and their ability to push the weights. They're going to be at the lower end in terms of absolute strength. So they're not going to enjoy it because they go in and they can't lift the same as everybody else. But typically, if they're playing a sport, they're probably quite springy, quite powerful, and that's how they get away with it. So then you're just playing into that a little bit, and you're like, you can compete against these guys. And then the other guys or girls are going to be thinking, oh, well, I'm stronger than that person. I should be doing better at this measure than them. So that's how you're getting and creating that competition. And similarly to what you said, like that is the benefit and the drawback or the negative to coaching female and male athletes in general is like with the female athletes, they're so intrinsically motivated that you're trying to create a little bit more extrinsic motivation within them and a little bit more competition, because the intrinsic will only push them so far. Now, it may push them further at times, but equally, you want a little bit of competition so that they're getting competitive with each other so they can hopefully transfer that onto the field. And then with the lads, equally, they're so extrinsically motivated, you're like trying to get them to be a little bit more intrinsically motivated. So you're not
a little more precise.
You're not lifting what that person is lifting, but look at how much you're lifting in comparison to what you were lifting 4 weeks ago. So just look at your own numbers. Don't be worried about everybody else's, because if they're looking at everybody else's and they're lower, we both know that with extrinsic motivation, there could become a little bit of apathy and I'm not going to bother trying because I'm never going to be up there. And that's the issue. So even though it's a benefit, it's also an issue in different things. And that's something we talk about. Your greatest weakness is also your greatest strength. But a big strength for you, obviously, at this point in your career, I'm not sure if you're still working one-on-one with athletes or you're just fully focused on this, but you have 9 years working in private sector now. So you would have worked a lot one-on-one. Would you have enjoyed working with one-on-one athletes a little bit more? And then with one-on-one athletes, did you find it more or find it easier to implement VBT into their training and fill a little bit of a gap with them?
I did most of my coaching actually in more small group, so not as much with the one-on-one stuff. It was like coaching at a club or in a team environment, but the team that we happened to be coaching were private members
Yes.
who'd paid for a gym membership and were showing up. So they weren't all from the local footy team or from the semi-pro footy team. They were basketballers, swimmers, dancers, track and field athletes. We had 24 or 22 different sports at one point in our gym. I think it's still around 16 or 17 different sports. 6 of those sports, we had one of each. But, a lot of soccer, a lot of Aussie rules, swimmers, track and field, dancers, plenty of diversity, which was really cool. And so a lot of that work in small groups there. And I think it was from that work in small groups that our frustration with VBT kind of arose, because we would try to implement it on a one-on-one basis with an athlete who got a little more advanced. Like, all right, let's try this velocity idea. And we'd try it. And because you're coaching in a small group, you're kind of bouncing around, you're coaching, 10 athletes at once or under your kind of control. So you can't sit there and handhold at one athlete and explain how the thing works and set it up and attach the tether and show them the app and give them a goal. And then you've missed 6 different sets from 6 different athletes behind you because you're worried about this thing. So the logistical challenge of VBT was a big part of where Metric was born from. It was like, surely there's an easier way to do this. Surely we can build an app and build an interface that athletes can just do themselves. There's the tripod, there's your phone, point and shoot, there's your numbers, and away you go. And so that's kind of where we're born from. So to be honest, we would use VBT and it was always a part of someone's program at some point in the gym. But to be honest, we didn't actually use it as much as you would think, given I am the VBT coach. So it's one of those things where it's like we did a lot of it and we use a lot in the internship and talked a lot in theory and applied a lot of the principles. But we didn't actually scale it out to the whole gym just because we couldn't afford to. Devices were really expensive, 6-7 years ago. It's only really recently that things have come down with Metric output, 2 new companies on the tables that are much more in the affordable sort of range. And in that time, I'm now building an app. I'm not actually coaching much, so I'm not actually using the app in a coaching set. I'm using a lot in my own training, and I'm talking to a lot of people online about how they're using it in their training. So getting a lot of user feedback and sort of doing online coaching kind of by Instagram direct messages at the moment, which is really great because I'm getting a lot of feedback from people on how they're applying it to their training. But before Metric, we weren't really using it much at all because it was just a logistical burden to do it for more than 3 or 4 athletes at a time in the gym when we had hundreds of members. Like, we just couldn't scale it out to, we thought about 50% of our population probably should have been on some level of VBT, whether it was just competition and feedback or more sophisticated zone type training or prescriptions and things like that. But we just couldn't do it because we couldn't scale it. Hence, we're now building our own product.
So you were working mainly on helping individuals who you knew and helping them and growing and improving their performance, maybe not in a one-to-one setting, but you were helping them directly. Whereas now your goal and your why is to help athletes indirectly by developing this app that they can use themselves, I suppose. But you still have to have that part of it where you're doing your market research and speaking to people and seeing what's working and what's not working. But at any time, do you now think, well, I'd love to do a little bit of coaching? Or are you thinking maybe when this is all set up, if I'm not too busy, I might get back to doing a little bit of coaching? Or are you just enjoying the self-employed or the business style founder lifestyle a little bit more?
The founder lifestyle is not as elaborate as you make it sound.
No,
you're not
on yachts in the Caribbean.
No, not. You saw the size of the fake grass. It's not a soccer pitch front yard. It's just a little nook. I miss the coaching a bunch. Like, the coaching is the awesome bit. Like, interacting with athletes, sharing their successes with them, celebrating as the ups and the downs, all that sort of stuff is what makes sports so cool. And learning the lessons along the way and becoming better people. It's all warm and fuzzy stuff, but it's true. Like, sport brings out the best in people, and it reveals character and develops it and all those kind of things. And being in the trenches, I hate that term, but being there with the athletes, working with them side by side, you get to experience that and you get to be part of that. And strength and conditioning in some sports is a 2% thing. In some other sports, it's a 20% thing. It varies based on the sport and how important that stuff is. But being any part of that is really rewarding. And so whenever we'd work with our Olympians before an Olympic campaign, it was just so nice to then sit at home at 4 a.m. and, watch the Olympics in Rio. It's like, I worked with them. They were in my gym only 2 months ago. Now they're out there, competing for medals. So I miss that so much. And I really hope I can get back to it at some point in the future if the app starts to get up and going and we get some more employees who can help with the marketing side of things and the outreach and the sales that I'm kind of running at the moment. But I also think, if the goal is to have the widest possible impact to help as many people improve their performance, improve their health, lift smarter, lift more often, enjoy their training more, whatever the case might be on whatever level, get to a high level of performance, building a fantastic velocity-based training app that's easy to use and easy to understand is a pretty good mission. And then also building education content around that to help other coaches then apply that app with their athletes is also pretty scalable as well. So whether I at Core Advantage go back to coaching directly, or whether I start coaching our coaches how to use Metric, might be the first step to that, I think, as well. So as the app moves from its sort of beta to late beta stage at the moment into a true 1.0 in the next couple of months, I think I want to be more involved in the gym, helping our guys use it, because we've still got a lot of athletes, we've still got a team of coaches, help them apply our app in that scalable way I wish I could have 5 years ago. And so it's like, here's what I wish I was able to do 5 years ago with the apps that were available. We've gone and built that app. Here's how I would use it now. Start using it with some of the more advanced athletes and see if you can get it to scale. And then I can go into the gym, the gym that I'm a part owner in, and watch the coaches and the athletes use and go, that part's just still too much friction. Let's go improve that feature. Let's go improve that user flow. Let's make it more robust, make it work at different positions or whatever the case might be, and get that feedback in a really intimate way, so that we can continue making the product that I wish I had 5 years ago when I was coaching full time.
So it sounds like you're content then, in a nutshell.
I'm pretty content. I like my job. I really like what we're working on. I really think it has the potential to have some impact and actually, move the needle on this stuff.
Well, I did want to ask you, because you're based in Melbourne, obviously in Australia, what you hear a lot of the time is that S&C coaches have these aspirations to work with a footy team because that's the upper echelons of sporting industry in Australia. That's the number one national sport, and Melbourne is the hub in which most of that happens. So I was going to ask you, if a Melbourne-based footy team, AFL team, came in and said, look, we want you to be head of performance in the morning, what would you say? But I think because of your passion for basketball, I'm going to flip it and I'm going to ask an even tougher question. If an NBA franchise did the same, what would you say, and what would you change, do you think, from what you see currently being done?
So I'm a Collingwood supporter in the Aussie rules, and we are on an 11-game winning streak. So if Collingwood came and said, we want you involved now as we run into the camp finals, I'd be like, no, don't change it. It's whatever's working, do it. I'm enjoying it watching from the outside, so I wouldn't get involved there, I don't think. It would be an awesome experience to have a year at the pro levels. I've never worked I've worked WNBL at the professional level here in the Women's Basketball League. But it was through the company, through Core Advantage. So they employed Core Advantage, and Durham was the head of high performance and I was his assistant strength coach. So it was we're in a pro setting, but it was a different pro setting that they came to us at the gym. So we didn't get to go into the club every day, for example, for work. So that wasn't how the thing worked. So it'd be really cool to spend a year. NBA would be really cool. Go look at the Spurs. They're my team down at San Antonio. It would be really cool to spend a year on. Yeah, I love Petey. He's such a gentleman. I was so sad when he left to Brooklyn. And then we had Jock Landell last year, who is a Core Advantage athlete. He's trained with us in the past. He was at the Spurs and was like, oh, just trade one Aussie, get another one in. This is fantastic. And then he's left now as well. He's now at the Suns. So I think the Spurs are now Aussie-less for the first time in a long time, which is a bit sad. So it can't be good for the team. But anyway, if I was offered a year to work at San Antonio in the high performance division as a coach or as an assistant coach, or whatever, it would be a phenomenal gap year type experience to go experience that. But I don't have huge desires to go and run one of those programs, because to be honest, I actually don't think I have the skill set I don't have the experience or skill set that would work at that level. I understand, like, from a fundamental point of view, what they need to do and what's involved, but I have very little practice and experience running and managing a team on that level. So as flattered as I'd be for the offer, I'd be like, I think there's probably better individuals suited to this with more skills in team settings. So I'm very comfortable with my coaching in a session. I can fix a squat, I can program good sets and reps, I can integrate velocity into that. But in terms of the broader managing a team, periodizing a calendar around games and road trips and double headers and all that kind of stuff, and then peaking into finals, I have very little experience doing that on a beyond the semi-pro level. The twice a week training plus game on the weekend also works a full-time job as a tradie kind of level. So
which is also very complex, if not sometimes a little bit more complex.
Sometimes a bit more complex, but the stakes are a bit lower and there's a bit more wiggle room in the calendar.
Not for them.
Yeah, so
not for them.
Not for them, true. But there's I suppose there's a buffer of margin of error in that program, in that if you stuff up for LeBron James and he misses 3 weeks, the team loses 3 of those games, they fall from 7th to 9th. Now they're out of the playoff and they're back in the play-in bracket. That's some high stakes, and there's millions of dollars on the line if you miss those finals and that player misses games. Like,
and everyone knows LeBron makes the decisions as well. So you're done, bro. You're gone.
He'd have his own coach, so maybe that'd take the pressure off. I just have to worry about the other 14 guys on the team. So, yeah, it'd be cool. It'd be awesome, but I definitely want a couple of years as an assistant before I go and take on a head role at any pro level. I think anything beyond, say, VFL level, I think that the stakes get pretty high, and the need for precision. The athletes are more finely tuned. There's more going into every effort, and we're now measuring meters, not just kilometers, so that the fidelity gets a lot higher. So I could be the VBT specialist. I could come in and I could help them integrate VBT into the gym and coach that and manage the data and the technology on that side of things. But the whole program might be a bit much.
But that's something that they do well in Australia, is particularly in the NRL, in that they hire coaches, and they do it actually in the AFL as well. They hire coaches with a specific task. So you might be the strength and power coach, or you might be the speed coach. Now you will have other requirements or other responsibilities, but that's your primary focus when you go in. And that wouldn't be done typically around the world as much. I think that's something that Australia really gets right. But that is a very diplomatic answer from you, and we'll accept it. And it's I think they'd be lucky to take it.
I'd love to be the strength and power coach. I think that'd be great. I think that's where I've kind of carved out a niche of being good. I like the conditioning stuff. I'm a big keen runner myself, and I like that stuff. But again, I haven't had much experience at the pro level. So strength and power, getting everyone in the trap bar jumps, getting the accommodating resistance cycles done, and that sort of stuff in the VBT, I reckon that'd be real fun. But then with the NBA guys, you got these massive units, 7 foot tall, trying to customize exercises to suit their bodies, and stiff backs and tight ankles and stuff. It'd be a lot of challenge. It'd be a lot of maintenance too, with 82 games in not many days.
Yeah, and it's a lot of managing the workloads is just like so difficult in relation to getting enough stimulus that hopefully you can reduce the risk of injury. So like you see what Daniel Bove is doing and his training, and it's training on the same day of games, but it's a fine line between how much do we do and how much is going to be enough but not too much. And that's tough. I don't envy him. It's a full-on job. But we'll move on to quickfire questions anyway.
Yes.
And the first one is proudest achievement to date.
Oh, proudest achievement. I try not to reflect too much on achievements. I also try not to look too much towards future things. I try and enjoy the present as much as possible. So I'm really trying to, with the app, when we set up the gym, it was all hectic. It was like, are we going to have enough money? Are we going to survive? We're going to go to business. So it's very stressful in terms of just getting to the next milestone, getting athletes in the door, getting members on board. And so I didn't really enjoy the process that much. It was a very stressful experience. With building the app and having the app release and each stage of the app go out, I'm really trying to enjoy the process and our growth in terms of the here and now. So where are we now? What's our next step? And not looking much further beyond that. So I'm pretty proud of the gym that we've built. The culture we've got at the gym is great. That's been really good fun. I'm really proud of the app we've built as well, and our idea and concept in this space. But in terms of proudest achievement, I'm not sure. I don't have any kids yet. I suppose that's usually the answer, isn't it? I'm not sure, to be honest. This one stumped me when I saw it on when you sent through a few notes before we got online. I probably should have a better answer for you next time. Kids
are the misses usually.
Yeah, I've got a pretty awesome partner. My partner Amanda is pretty incredible. We got engaged earlier this year, getting married in November. We hope it's all pretty close and pretty stressful, but she's pretty awesome. I've done pretty well to score her. I think I'm definitely punching out of my league.
So that will be it then, if she listens.
Yes, when I marry the love of my life, Amanda, that'll be my proudest achievement for sure. Good save, thanks, Pete.
Favorite athlete of all time?
Oh, athlete of all time. I'm a big Patty Mills fan. As an Aussie and a big Aussie basketball fan, Patty Mills has got a lot of heart, and he's done a lot for someone who's so short. Like, to be able to play at the level he has, like, you don't expect that from someone who's 6'1", 6'2". So he's incredible for the culture he's built at the Boomerster. He's transformed that program, not single-handedly, but he's been a big driving force of that. Also a big fan of Michael Jordan. Like, I was a bit late for his time, but Michael, the way he played the game and just watching some of his highlights, it's just like, how did he do that stuff? And just how much of a competitor he was. Might not have been the greatest teammate to have, depending on who you ask and what documentary you watch. But
at the same time, for some, he could have been the best.
Yeah, he brought some incredible, like, he pushed you to your limits, and he took, like, I think sometimes today in the world, people are too nice too often. It's like, oh, he tried. Well, he's close enough. But Michael, like, was the opposite. It's like, no, like, I'm giving my all. I expect the same. So maybe he could have been more forgiving when people made mistakes along the way. But I think that I'm giving my all, get on my level kind of attitude, I think can be good sometimes in the right doses.
In the right context, with the right group around you, yeah, for sure. And I'm a huge Jordan fan Michael, as well. But that, as you touched on there, some of his highlights, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I recommend to all to watch the Michael Jordan Top 100 Moments. And it's on YouTube, and you're watching like number 96, and you're like, this is number 96. What's coming after this? Like, and it continues, and you're like, what the hell? For a guy to have so many incredible moments, it's just, now they do play a lot, but at the same time, it's just freakish.
Now, I will give you one more as well outside of basketball. I don't want to be too basketball centric, but Carlin Isles, who's the rugby sevens player for America, his highlight reel is also insane. Yeah, it doesn't look human the way he runs on a rugby field when he gets the ball on the wing. So I love rugby sevens. I think that is one of the coolest sports out there. They play a whole tournament. They play 8 games in a day, and they decide the gold medal in 12 hours, and they're done. And the whole tournament happens in these like tiny 15-minute games. And he played for America, and he used to be a track runner, a sub 10.5 runner, and he changed to rugby sevens, and he is just phenomenal. So good to watch his highlights. So
talk about another freak athlete.
There's one out.
He's just so unbelievable. It's at that level where when you're playing rugby, when you're younger, you have one kid that's an early developer, and he just gets the ball and runs around everybody. But he's doing that level. To grown men. He's like, I have the ball now, I'll just run around it. It's been interesting watching how people have defended him now in that, limiting his space and limiting his opportunities. But for sure, he's a huge asset to have to rugby sevens in the World Series, and a freak athlete for sure. What's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months?
Biggest thing I've learned in the last 12 months. I'm learning Spanish at the moment. I'm 200 days into a Duolingo streak. So yo hablo un poco. No, I'm not doing very well on that. Biggest thing in the last 12 months. Building a great product isn't enough. You need to also market. You need to let people know. You need to have good customer service. You need to have good testing. You need to reach out to people. Like, you can't just build the easiest to use VBT product and hope that it goes viral. You also need to let people know about it. You need to market. You need to write blogs, do YouTube videos, go on podcasts, and then network. You need to meet other people in the industry, have chats, partner, affiliate. Like, there's more to a startup, more to an app than just a cool idea. And so we've had a cool idea 18 months ago. We've got it to launch now. Now it's about, making that sustainable, making that a business, hiring people, growing it. So I think that's something that I'm still learning that, going for coffee with someone is part of your job. It might feel like, a nice chance to chat with a sports scientist or a, other person in a sports tech company, but it's part of the job. It's part of growing this and making this thing real. So
nice. Then what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
My 18-year-old self. Sports not the only thing in the world. I was very sports obsessed when I was 18. I'm now a lot less. So I still love my sport. Still love watching the Olympics and some pro stuff and follow my teams. But sports and everything, movies are great. Music's good. Culture, arts. But also, like, in terms of skill set, you need to diversify. So 18-year-old self, I would have said, go do physio. instead of doing sports science. So I would have done a physio degree and then got an ASCA, Australian Strength and Conditioning Association level 1 and 2, and then done, courses that way and become a physio who happens to lift weights and be, that way skilled. I think having physio skills on the gym floor would have been so handy to just like, oh, I've got a sore knee, jump in the back. Let's do a quick assessment. All right, cool, it's this. Well, we can continue training with this. Otherwise, as an S&C coach, both from a liability point and from a lack of skills, like sore knee, go see the physio. Today we'll do upper body. We'll wait and we'll see. So a physio skill set would have been really valuable back then. But also, I would now tell my 18-year-old self, learn how to code, learn how to write code, learn how to learn a bit of computer science on the side. So maybe I wouldn't have needed those physio skills if I'd learned a bit of coding and stuff along the way. I could have been building stuff for the gym, even just admin apps and functionality like that. And then maybe I would have been able to help Davey build the first version of Metric as well, and been able to build web dashboards and data analysis tools as well. So I'm learning a little bit of Python at the moment to teach myself a little bit of that stuff. I'm not sure if I'm going to be building any features in the app anytime soon, but I think being conversant in that stuff is important. And I think it's also will improve my data science skills. So I'll be a better sports scientist for knowing how code works and understanding the fundamental idea. It's like it opens up more ideas and more ways to crunch numbers and find insight into a spreadsheet full of velocity and load numbers and pick out readiness indicators and things like that.
And you're incredibly lucky to have a brother that is so informed in that area, like to help you out. And equally, like if he's able to do it, then it's useful for you to know, but it's not absolutely a requirement that you know as much as him, I suppose. So like I would assume it's probably unlikely if you were to talk to your 18-year-old self if he would take all of that on. But hopefully he wouldn't listen to you anyway, basically, is what you're saying.
18-year-old Jacob still thought he was going to be a pro basketballer, so
there you go. Well,
yeah,
look,
he wouldn't have listened much at all.
Hopefully one of the NBA teams comes calling soon for that head of performance role. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a blast, and I wish you all the best with Metric, and have a good weekend, a good rest of your week, and cheers for coming on.
Mate, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.